I'm Gerard Goggin. Sorry I can't join you for the panel today, but I'm afraid I'm sick and haven't been able to travel, but wanted to start by thanking my co-conveners Alia Dakouri and Julia Hoffman for bringing together this panel and for yourselves participating. And I think it's a terrific idea because the topic's an important one. Obviously this IAMCR conference is about communications and citizenship, and I think a neglected dimension of that has been disability, and our theme today are communications rights, communication human rights and disability. I think really gives some much deserved and overdue attention to this topic. So why I wanted to start was to just explain first a little of my background. I've been working on new media and disability since the early 90s, having worked with particularly with groups of people with disabilities in the social movements around telecommunications and now new media. And I suppose part of my interest in this really came from last year's IAMCR at Mexico, becoming better acquainted with Alia Dakouri's work and also Julia's work around communication rights. And I suppose it really struck me that this is a topic regarding which disability has a lot to say. So it's certainly the case that disability itself, with respect to communications rights, hasn't been given much attention, and that's overdue. But also that thinking about disability really adds to our understanding of communication rights. So to just give you a short overview of my paper, and it will be short as watching videos on YouTube, they're probably best done if they're mashups rather than straight to camera jobs. But to just give you an overview of my paper, the first aspect of it talks about the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and makes the argument that this really advances our understanding of communication and media rights in new ways. So the new Disability Convention is incredibly important because for the first time it's a systematic statement in international law, a new treaty about the rights of people with disabilities. But it's really interesting and significant too because it's very much about communications rights. At the heart of human rights, according to this UN convention, are communications rights, and these have crucially to do with new technologies. Hence the title of my paper, the Twitter Treaty. So this really offers a new framework for advancing the communications rights of persons with disabilities and through that human rights for all of us. But it also offers a new general understanding of communications rights and particularly media citizenship. So the UN Disability Convention, with its many provisions about communications rights and media citizenship, particularly new media, really is a considerable advance that we need to think about when we think about media citizenship generally. Consider, for instance, Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the famous 1948 inauguration of international law in this respect. And Article 19 is core to how we've understood media citizenship. Well, the UN Disability Convention has very many provisions that look at different aspects of new technologies and how through these people gain access to culture and media. So that's the first part of my paper. The second part then reviews and sort of calls up the work on accessibility and disability. It's been done for many years now, that many of us are familiar with, and often when we go to conferences, internet studies conferences or media studies conferences, the disability paper is often, or the disability talk is often about accessibility. And I have been involved in this for quite a while, and I particularly wanted to just bring up and review the topic of mobile phones and accessibility. Mobile phones, as we know, are now used by 5 billion people around the world, especially those in the global south and the poorer countries. Interestingly, in the global south, the incidence of disability, as we also know, is very high, and it's also gendered. There are particular issues facing women with disabilities in the global south. So the mobile phone is a crucially important new media technology for very many people, but especially for people with disabilities. And if we look at the accessibility work in this area, over some years, and often reluctantly, telecommunications and mobile companies have taken initiatives in this area. And there, for instance, recently, the last 2 years, a global database on accessibility features of mobile phones. So some of this has been driven by industry wanting to comply with laws, national laws, and also emerging norms and calls from customers to make products more accessible. So the third part of my paper explores a new arena of this, which is sort of illuminated, hopefully, by the case study of the Apple iPhone. So the iPhone, launched in mid-2007, has been phenomenally successful, yet it's not very well realised that accessibility has been a problem with the iPhone. That when it was launched, it didn't have the kind of accessibility software that Apple had become famous for itself with its that it was bundled into its Apple computers, nor did it have the accessibility features that mobile phone companies and software providers were able to make standard for people with disabilities who had the money to and wished to use mobile phones. When Apple finally decided to implement kind of real accessibility features, it was mid-2009, with their voiceover system that's standard for the Apple computer as well. Now, ironically, Apple iPhones are acclaimed by many people with disabilities as a kind of innovative technology, and they're comparable in price, even though they're relatively expensive, because rather than buying, say, a Nokia or a Samsung or a Sony Ericsson phone, having to buy the software that goes with them, for instance, screen reader software for blind and vision impaired people, you can buy an iPhone that has the software bundled in. So the iPhone is a really interesting example of something that's galvanised the smartphone market, which is really the future in some ways of mobile media. Think of Google's Android with its open source system, and there are a whole set of things going on there. So the final part of my paper really tries to think through what are the issues and the dynamics here. You've got this fast-moving area of technology where, in China, for instance, computers are being cheaply made, cloned and sold, and affordable computers. How does accessibility and how did disability get taken account of in this kind of new settings of global technologies? So I think here certainly the UN Disability Convention is important, and the national laws and the new guidelines and emphasis that will come from this Disability Convention. So too is standards work, which is incredibly important for early on getting design issues around disability on the discussion table. But these areas are so dynamic that really they need genuine engagement from people who have expertise in disability and from people with disabilities themselves. And here I suggest that funding for advocacy and representational groups is incredibly important. So the paper's there on the website. I hope it's useful. I very much look forward to what comes out of today and hearing of the dialogue, and hopefully editing a special journal issue on this topic with Julia and Alia. And otherwise, thank you for your time and best wishes for what transpires for the rest of the conference. Thank you.